Alright, so this is going to be video number one of several videos showing you how to set up some ITAD functionality in IQ Reseller as of version 32. First of all, there's a few things in the system we'll need to have set up, so I'm going to walk you through those at first. If we mouse over the admin menu, we have a variety of different options. A couple of them include erasure methods and PO types. PO types allows you to basically give yourself different categories for different types of purchase orders so they can go into different revenue and cost of goods accounting. So here I have an ITAD PO type that I've designated for my cost of goods and my revenue to go to. So you can go ahead and create one of those in order to have a separate purchase order type. I've also got repair purchases or inventory for resale or parts depot, depending on what I want to do for that particular PO. You can also create erasure methods in IQ Reseller. The reason for this is we do have an API that allows third-party software such as Blanco, SoftThinks, or WipeOS to be able to look at an item's inventory ID number that's scanned in from the barcode on the IQ Reseller label to then look up in the system which PO it came from, and then to be able to see what the erasure method is for either that client vendor or for the purchase order. So here you can see I've created a couple examples. I've got Shred, 3Pass, NIST, Department of Defense, but these are all customizable. You create them by clicking New or View. I even did a little bit of experimenting with creating multiple options in there so that they might be able to write some logic on the side of the erasure software that says, you know, if it is this kind of an item, then use this. So if it's like a laptop, then use NIST. If not, then use just a system reset. So you can kind of create some different you can be creative about it depending on what you have for a software. The next thing we're going to take a look at is some of the condition codes. So traditionally in IQ Reseller, condition codes have meant buying and selling. When you're doing ITAD work or refurbishing, they can be a lot more than just buying and selling condition codes such as new, used, refurbished, but they can also be every step in the process. So as an example, I've got 1 through 9 here are my buying and selling, as well as my RMA. I also have some grading, and then also here in my 20s, I have kind of set up my ITAD processes. So I've got quarantine, I've got audit, I've got erasure, I've got asset tag collection, photo documentation, scrap. There's also tech, and then I've got clean, repair, core exchange. So basically these are all customizable. Again, you can create new ones depending on what it is you want to have for either buying and selling terminology or for what your steps are in your ITAD process. Now I will notice that I will point out that there is an ability to designate these things as billable services. So here I've got my condition code for erasure. I have the full version of the word or of the condition code or the process, and then if I want, I can map it to a sales price field that shows up in the master item. That would be more useful for things like refurbished or new. Back to erasure, I can also flag these things as a billable service. So this is going to come in very important in a couple of steps here in the next videos, but this is where you would actually not just create the process or condition for the steps in your workflow, but where you can label them as a billable service. So this lets the system know that when an item goes through one of these steps that it has a potential to be billable. In addition to this, we're going to look at some product attributes. So actually, let's go to system setup first. So here we'll go to system setup, and before we get going, there's a couple things just to point out here. Now that we've created some different PO types, if we want to, we can go in here and make the system require that you put in a purchase order type. So if you are in fact wanting to keep them separate because they're different profit centers or margin centers, or you want to be able to know what types of purchase orders they were for reporting purposes, then you can require that they be attribute, that it requires the product type, as well as grouping attributes. I'm going to get to that in a second. And then there's also some logic in here for enabling the complete logic. I'm not going to go into that too much in these videos, but the complete logic I might cover in another video later. But basically it lets you keep everything from a purchase order in like a locked status or a pending status. We call it uncompleted, so that it cannot be sold or counted in the inventory quantities until the whole PO has been released or completed. So it kind of holds everything in a status that doesn't let you do anything to it yet. Let's see, what else do we have here? So those are kind of the main items on the PO level. Let's go ahead and look at the client vendor stuff here. So underneath client vendor, we also have the ability to create a different client vendor type. So here I have tier 1 ITAD, tier 2 ITAD. By default, you're going to get, dealer, end user, vendor, freight vendor, and government. But the rest of these you can customize and set them up as defaults on there. That way you can have better reporting in the report writer. There's also another thing that we do have to have set up before we're able to do the rest of this stuff, which is to go into master items. And when we create a master item, you must at least put them into a category 1 level category in order to properly have a billable services. So when you're creating a master item, like here I've got the 00H834. When I've created it, you have to give it a part number, manufacturer name, and some sort of description. You also have the ability to have different types, separate GL codes for them as well. But the important part I'm trying to point out here is that when you do create it, you do not have to create a category or assign them a category when you create master items in general. However, if you're going to be using the billable services feature that I'm going to show in a little bit, you will have to assign them to at least a category 1 level category. So we're going to be able to show how billable services can vary depending on which category they're in. Okay? So these are some of the things we have to have set up before we can begin using the ITAD functionality within IQ Reseller. For the rest of the information, we'll go to the second video where we'll talk about the client vendor setup.